Welcome, Drupal Iron Camp. So I'm going to be presenting my session on learnings from Drupal 8 from the perspective of a site builder. My name's Chandeep Khosa. Who am I? So I'm a freelance Drupal site builder and front-end developer. I've been working with Drupal 8 core contributions for a couple of years. I organize Drupal West London, and I also live in West London, so that's quite convenient. And some of the work I've done in Drupal has involved training and mentoring young developers and apprentices. And I love Drupal. So I'm self-taught with Drupal since playing around with it in 2008. When I was procrastinating when I should have been working on my final year project, I remember it being winter 2007. And I remember reading comparisons with WordPress and Joomla and how Drupal made more sense but was harder. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. And I've been addicted ever since. So some of my work has involved mainly freelancing and contracting. And as a result, I've worked in lots of different places. And the projects I've worked with have been for organizations such as large health charities like the Health Foundation, Toyota, Oxford University, and many others, including Team GB, Christian Aid. But that experience has basically taught me around different site building techniques and what makes sense for content editors in different places. What I'm going to be covering in the session is partially some of the planning process and project management around working on Drupal 8 for the first time, and what I'd like to be able to suggest. Who's already worked on a Drupal 8 project so far? Great, not too many hands. So hopefully this will be very useful. And some of the site building techniques I've used using media, paragraphs, configuration management, and display suite. So firstly, planning/project management. It's very important to map which modules you're going to use in Drupal 8. Some of them haven't moved across from Drupal 7. Some of them are completely different. And some things are now in core. So, as so much is new, make sure you allow lots of time for planning, especially if it's your first project. Otherwise, you may find yourself running out of time, and then that's always bad for deadlines and clients. So, my recommendation would be to double or maybe even triple your planning phase in the project, or even potentially use your first Drupal 8 project as a test project that doesn't need to go live for a client. So all of your training time and learning within that then makes you much more valuable for when you're delivering a client project. Many modules you used to rely on in Drupal 7 are no longer available. So make sure you plan that in as well. That may mean you might even have to write custom modules, or you can be creative and do stuff within core from the functionality that's inside it. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So just remember that. Some modules don't have an upgrade path. Some of those are in core, and some of them are partially in core. Examples of modules that are a little bit in core, but also still exist as an additional module to give additional functionality, are things such as menu block. If you add the module after the one that's already in core, you get a couple of additional options. There are other cases such as CTools. There's a light version, and then you get the full version if you add it in. So leave lots of spare time for the research of this. Some of the things that are different. Web form in Drupal 7 doesn't yet fully exist in Drupal 8, but there is the contact module in core. In Drupal 7, the contact module, I never found it super useful, apart from the basic fields of full name, email address. But this can be extended, and by using the contact storage module, you allow it to be able to store information, such as having a CV file attachment that gets sent, other things like that. With features, it's moved across to configuration management. Now I'd heard lots of talks around it, and I knew lots of the cool things and the advantages, but actually getting it working on your machine and getting it working in a workflow of other developers, that does take a little bit of time. especially if you want to make sure it's done correctly and you don't wipe somebody else's configuration. So yeah, let's leave a little bit of extra time for that. And with media, you used to, in Drupal 7, just install the media module. In Drupal 8, you have lots of different modules. And there's a base module and there's extension modules. So it's worth knowing about those. I'll go through some of that setup. So, Drupal 8 configuration management. As you'll see on the diagram, which I've borrowed from my friends at Pantheon, you've got exported configuration moving from the left with code in. You've got content and active configuration perhaps need to move back from the production site, and managing that can be a little bit challenging. Two main commands that will just work once you have Drupal 8 installed. To export your configuration, it basically grabs all of the configuration in your database and just dumps it. So no having to create features, no having to decide what components you want bundled up. You just run that one command, drush cex. Be careful how you say that to your colleagues. So yeah, it's really great. So if you were to run that command, straight away you get lots of different YAML files being exported, and by default they go into your site's default folder, and they go into a folder called config. But because there's lots of different components that go in, you end up with a really big list, and then they'll all go into Git, and it's all nice. One of the great things about that is, unlike with Drupal 7, firstly you had to install features and get it working and decide how features are going to be built. The planning of those features varies from developer to developer, and new people going on that project, this is just really good. And drush CIM does the opposite. It imports the configuration that's there in code and then overwrites your local database on your local machine, and then you get the latest changes that have been pushed in Git configuration. Here's an example of just a few of those many files that get created. You can't really see the detail here, but it's more to give an indication of A down to B up to C. And you can see that that could be quite overwhelming. But you'll see that on this project I've got things like Bootstrap Sass and blocks and lots of other bits of configuration. This is what it looks like if you were to run the drush command. You can also do this via the UI if you want to, but it's definitely worth doing it in drush if you can. So if you then so this is me running drush CIM or drush CEX. I can't actually remember at this moment, but this is basically asking me, okay, so this is what's changed. Are you sure you want to proceed? And in this case, that YAML file at the top is a new one. And the other ones have been deleted. And then it's just asking you for a confirmation. Very crucial. Don't just press yes next straight away. Just make sure it makes sense. If you would like a diff of the actual changes in certain files, changes come up in yellow color as well. Sometimes it's nicer just to use the UI to review that. And that's underneath configuration and an option called configuration sync. And on there you get, similar to features, if you had the diff module installed, it tells you what lines of code have changed from before and after. Nice UI. I know you can do that with drush as well, but I prefer the UI there. So if we were to proceed with this step, it's quite interesting, yeah. So this is almost the same screen, but if you're in the UI, and you get your changes at the top. So it's basically saying these following changes in your active configuration have changed, and it almost gives you a double check to just review that list to make sure you're not forgetting anything, because some of these changes may also have some manual steps. For instance, blocks are not in configuration, so if there's anything from blocks that you need to remember, sometimes it's worth doing that manually. There are ways of doing it. Default configuration, default content module allows you to create a custom module to have default content that populates those blocks. It's also a little bit challenging to write if you are a site builder though. So yeah, here you'd click the import all button. The view differences will give you a diff. With the paragraphs module, who has used paragraphs in Drupal 7? Okay. I love paragraphs. Paragraphs changed my life. It's that good. And we were talking about paragraphs versus field collection in the pub last night. So I think my general recommendation there was stop using field collection, just use paragraphs for everything. It's subjective, but it's much more flexible. Some of the types of paragraphs that you can create are listed above. I've got things on here on a specific website like Advisor. You can create lots of different advisors, which is basically a person profile with different fields, a photo, an image, other things like that. You can also add background images and add extra things for them. You can add CTAs, documents, FAQs, other images, quotes, different types of quotes, lots of different things you can do with this. And then on a paragraph field, you would allow which of these paragraph types are allowed in that paragraph field on a specific content type. But you can go through some of that detail. This is more of an overview. And this is what it would look like on the edit screen if you've now chosen to add a paragraph. So at the top there, you'll see that there's an image. And right at the bottom of the page, you'll see adding image, quote, and quote with person. This field is allowed to add those three types of paragraph type. And if you wanted to add a new one, you would click the button there, and you'd get the same form, but with empty fields. So in this case, there is the ability to add somebody with name, job title, company, and quote information. And then what I've got is the quote information is automatically styled with the quote marks when it comes down on the theme level. But people aren't able to do anything else in the WYSIWYG editor. So that's quite cool. But also, you would then get one of those kind of cross things that you can drag and drop things on each of the paragraph items so you can change the order of them. That's not as flexible with field collection. With media, so I'd mentioned the shift has gone from one module to a few. What I've learned is media is awesome, but not to be underestimated. I spent many hours trying to get it configured. Well, yeah. Don't tell Yanis, though. So the media entity module exists. It is extended by some other sub-modules that you grab and add into your code base as you need. So media entity gives you most of the media functionalities, almost a port of media itself. Media entity image gives you image functionality. Document, surprisingly, gives you document functionality. And there used to be another one for videos, but the new chosen preferred method is the video embed field. Once you have media set up, you have the ability to set up media bundles. What's on the screen is what you would see on the managed fields of a document media bundle. So each of the three examples I showed just before of images, documents, and videos, you may have those as your media bundles, or you may have more specific things like a Vimeo video that has additional fields on it. You can customize it however you want to. In this example, you don't just have an image field or a document that has a PDF upload. What I've done here is I've got additional fields that help to populate views in certain blocks on a website. But to set that up, the document exists, and it's just a file field, a standard PDF, but you also have the ability to add entity reference and date fields, and then that helps with your filters on your views. If you were to have this set up as a paragraph type, so you've got your media bundle set up. Now on paragraph types, I also have something called document, just for consistency. And there's a documents page where you can add lots of different documents in sections. And with nested paragraphs, so in nested paragraphs, you can add a section, and inside that, you can add a document. But what that allows you to do is potentially have a section with some documents, another section, change the order of the sections. Content editors can really easily add a new section. This is the managed form display. For people that haven't used Drupal 8 yet, you still have your managed fields and your managed display, but managed form display is basically what you see on your edit form. And it's quite a nice separation. It takes a bit of time. This would have originally just been in the one tab, but the first two tabs manage fields and manage form display used to be the one. But on here, you get to decide what you can do on the widget settings. So with some of these cases, you may want to be able to only add new content or use existing content. But to have a fully flexible document, you would ideally be able to add new ones and add existing ones. And this is really cool because it uses inline entity form. So it allows you to add new content without having to create it somewhere else and then attach it here. It uses the inline entity form module. This is what it looks like on your edit screens once it's set up properly. So at the top, you've got your add new media or add existing media. And then if you were to click on add existing media and start typing, you've got your autocomplete, which then searches from available content. This can be extended, and you can have a nicer view for this, your media library, and that would be using an entity browser. Around theming, some people may have a confusion on which base theme to use. So in core, you have stable, you have classy. On a project I was working on, the agency had basically already set it up using stable theme. The issue there was stable theme has very minimal CSS and divs, which is quite good. But when you actually want to style something and you want to target it, it's not ideal. I prefer having classy there, which has lots of classes, and that's a better approach from my perspective. I found the documentation was lacking in terms of giving an opinion, but for most cases, this will be fine. And then if you use stable, you can add your own classes. But I'm guessing most people don't want to add their own. What I've chosen to do on most of the projects I've worked on is I've used Bootstrap as a base theme, created my own custom sub-theme, played around with YAML files. Any questions? Thank you for listening.